What's up, everyone? Welcome to the NBA Daily Podcast, your home for useless facts about the NBA. My name's Dawson Shine, and I'm your host. Starting off today, we're going to be talking about the playoff games from yesterday. There were 4 big games, one between the Detroit Pistons, Cleveland Cavaliers, the next one between the Charlotte Hornets, Miami Heat, the next one between the Memphis Grizzlies, San Antonio Spurs, and the last one was between the Portland Trail Blazers and the Los Angeles Clippers. So, we're going to begin with the most interesting game yesterday, the Detroit Pistons versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now that's the 1 seed, the Cavaliers, versus the 8 seed, the Pistons, in the Eastern Conference. This game was very close all the way to the end, and was actually the only decent game yesterday to watch. The other games were really blowouts, and they weren't that interesting, to be honest, because no one wants to see a team win by 25 points. So this game was much closer. The Cavaliers won 106-101 in a very hard-fought game. Detroit was actually up by 5 points at halftime due to some very strong three-point shooting, especially by their bench. Reggie Bullock, Stanley Johnson played amazing. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, now he's only his 3rd year in the NBA, he's 22, and he played on fire last night. 7 for 14, 4 for 8 from 3, 21 points. He had one of the best plus-minuses on the team and was just all around the best scorer. He was getting wide open shots, but he was also hitting daggers straight in the face of players like LeBron James, as well as locking up players on the other side of the court. Reggie Jackson had another good game, that's their point guard. He had 17 points, 7 assists. Andre Drummond with another double-double, 13 points, 11 rebounds. But unfortunately, the hot shooting couldn't help contain the big 3 of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now this big 3 is Kevin Love, LeBron James, and Kyrie Irving. Of course, everyone knows LeBron James, and we've seen him in the playoffs every year go amazing. But last year, we missed out on seeing Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving at full strength. This year is different. We got to watch them play at full strength and see how they actually do together. Kyrie Irving, 31 points on 24 shots, 6 assists, 5 rebounds. Kevin Love was aggressive in this game. He wanted to get it in the post against players like Tobias Harris and Marcus Morris. He was feasting on them. And when I say feasting, he had 28 points and 13 rebounds on 22 shots, 4 for 8 from the 3 as well. He was looking very aggressive, which is different from what it seemed like in the regular season. Now he's really started to heat up at the end of the year, but earlier, he was seeming like he was just going to be a spot-up shooter, that they actually reduced his role all the way to just a shooter in the corner that you passed it out to once in a while. But man, in this game, he took it right to the players that he knew he could. Tobias Harris especially had trouble guarding him. He couldn't keep him out of the post, and he couldn't defend him out in the three-point line, and it was just absolute feast. But another great player is obviously LeBron James. Can't forget about him, and man was he passing it on point yesterday. Despite only shooting 9 for 17 and 0 for 3 from 3, he had 22 points and 11 assists, and those were a big 11 assists, because he was huge in the first half especially. He was passing it to everyone who was open and making sure that the entire offense looked involved. Their passing, just in total on the Cleveland Cavaliers, was absolutely incredible. It looked like they were the Spurs, because they were passing it around and finding the open man every way they could. In the fourth quarter especially, they had one sequence where there was 9 passes in 15 seconds from outside the three-point line, swinging it around into the post, and then back out for a Dellavedova 3 to help take the lead again in the fourth quarter. And that was huge. Their passing was keeping the Pistons on their toes the entire game, which kept them at bay, really. And the Pistons were unable to keep up with the Cavaliers, especially in the fourth quarter, when the Cavaliers stormed back to take the lead and then win the game. They closed it out with clutch free throws all around and just all-around great play from their team. But it's definitely going to be an interesting series because the Pistons seem to really match up well with the Cavaliers. People really thought that it was going to be blowouts a lot, but what it looks like to me is it's going to be at least closely fought games. It looks like last year's sweep when the Celtics got swept by the Cavaliers in the first round. The Celtics were not able to win a game, but they did keep some of them close, and this is what this series looks like it might become. Next up was not so much of a good game, and that was the Hornets versus the Heat. This is the 3-6 matchup, the Heat being the 3 seed, and it was in Miami. Miami destroyed them, and there's no other words really to describe this. They were up 41-22 in the first half. 41 points is actually a playoff record for the Miami Heat. Not only that, they ended up winning 123-91. That's a 32-point blowout, setting a Miami Heat record for the largest victory in the playoffs and also the most points scored in the playoffs. Those are not things you want to be on the other side of if you're the Hornets. Overall, the Hornets really did not have a good game. I mean, it's simple as that. The only players that really had decent games overall were Nicholas Batum and Kemba Walker, and that's only on the stat sheet. That's not in the actual court, because most of their points, especially with Nicholas Batum's 24 and Kemba's 19, most of those points came after the game was already a blowout. In the first quarter, the team could not hang with the Heat. They just couldn't. They were getting eaten up alive by Hassan Whiteside and Luol Deng. Yep, those may not be players you always think of when you think of the Heat. You normally think of Dwayne Wade, or maybe Chris Bosh. But of course, with Chris Bosh out, and Dwayne Wade taking a slightly more back seat, especially in this game, it looked like Hassan Whiteside and Luol Deng were able to take control of the game on their own. Luol Deng was 11 for 13 from the field, 4 for 6 from three-point land, 31 points. That's incredible for him, especially because he's aging. But remember, he was very good when he was on the Chicago Bulls. And then Hassan Whiteside, 21 points, 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, that's incredible numbers for such a young player who wasn't even in the NBA 2 years ago. But now, he's starting, and he's playing amazing in the playoffs. And last night, he had 10 points in the first quarter. Luol Deng had 11, and it was turned into a blowout from the start. Joe Johnson also chipped in with 11 points, Dwayne Wade with 16 and 7 assists. Goran Dragic had 10 assists. Their whole starting lineup played amazing, and their bench helped close the game out as well. Amari Stoudemire, Justice Winslow. This team is pretty scary. The Miami Heat's roster looks like it would be great 5 years ago, but even with the veterans they have on it now, they look like they're going to be great now. Their players are playing 26 minutes a game roughly on average. They're not even having to play too many because they're so deep into the bench. They have great three-point shooters that are spreading the floor. They have amazing passers in Goran Dragic and Dwayne Wade. They have great inside presence with Hassan Whiteside. And then their mid-range game with Luol Deng and Joe Johnson is off the charts. Especially Joe Johnson can always create his own shot. Dwayne Wade can always create his own shot. And so you know this team, even if they get stuck in a rut on the offensive end, they can always find someone to get a shot up and try and get it in. So it was really just kind of an unfair game. I mean, they shot 58% to Charlotte's 43%, and overall, it wasn't even close. Charlotte really needs to look at how they're going to defend and play small, maybe, against the Miami Heat, because there's no way they can match up with a big lineup. Hassan Whiteside is going to eat Al Jefferson or Frank Kaminsky alive. They can't keep up athletically with him. Hassan Whiteside is just too athletic, too strong. He'll just body them out of the paint and score. Dunks, everything. Doesn't matter. I mean, he only missed 2 shots last night, and they're lucky he missed that many. So I'm thinking that next game, the only way that Charlotte's going to be able to take control and maybe even try and win a game or at least stay competitive is if they go smaller. If they have Nicholas Batum at the 4, and then they put someone like Cody Zeller at the 5, and that's it. And they try to play very small because there's no other way they're going to be able to do it. Maybe even run a lineup with Jeremy Lin and Kemba Walker on the floor at the same time to try and get some sort of spacing and some sort of offense that can create its own shot even if it gets stagnant. Because we know Kemba Walker can create his own shot, and we know Jeremy Lin can do that. But maybe combining them together can help keep the paint open so that you can actually get a couple of dribble drives in there, kick it out for a 3 from Marvin Williams or Courtney Lee, something like that, so they can at least get going. But otherwise, they were just outmatched in this game, and we'll see how it's going to work out in the next game. But there were some other games last night, and one of them was Memphis Grizzlies versus San Antonio Spurs. Now yesterday, I predicted that this game was going to be a blowout. Obviously, Memphis is missing a lot of players. Tony Allen did play last night and made almost no difference in the game. The Spurs outmatched him at every position on the court. The Grizzlies were throwing out the lineup that was basically just a bunch of washed-up stars or washed-up players, hoping they could put something together that could put some points on the board and try and defend against the Spurs' hyper-efficient offense. Unfortunately, they couldn't do it. They tried, but they couldn't. The Spurs blew them out 106-74, and it was not even that close, to be honest. It was the 16th game in the playoffs where Popovich has held a team under 75 points, which is a playoff record. And also, they held everyone to poor shooting on the Grizzlies. Well, nearly everyone. The only player on the Grizzlies that actually shot relatively well was Vince Carter, who had 6 for 7. He shot 85%, had 16 points. But besides him, the whole team was pretty bad. They shot 40% overall, which is awful. And the Spurs, man, they were incredible. Kawhi Leonard, 20 points. LaMarcus Aldridge, 17 points. They spread the floor properly. Even Danny Green pitched in with 1 3, which, honestly, for the season he's been having, that's pretty good. Tony Parker had a little bit of a resurgence with 15 points. Patty Mills played well. The whole team contributed to this win. And obviously they were able to rest their starters as well, give them time to rest for the next game because they were up by 30 points or so throughout the entire game. Wire-to-wire win and a wire-to-wire victory means that you get to have your bench players take some minutes away from your starters, which allows them to get some rest for the next game, which is very important in the playoffs because you don't want to be on tired legs. But interestingly enough, today we just got new news. Kawhi Leonard, who last night had a great game, got named Defensive Player of the Year for the second year in a row. Not only does he defend on the court, he defends his titles off the court, which is incredible. And so they are also now the best defense in the league with the best defender in the league by vote. And they look like they're going to keep dominating in this series. I don't think the Grizzlies have any chance to win a game. They're not even close to competitive with this team. And it would take a miracle in Memphis in order to win a game. However, there was one game last night that I predicted to be a very good one. I was wrong, and that was the Portland Trailblazers versus the Los Angeles Clippers. I thought this game was going to be very close all the way to the finish and be a hard-fought game. Unfortunately, the Clippers stayed very hot, and they won 115-95. Yep, another blowout. Yep, 20 points. And it was really just bad. It started off pretty good. Portland was only down by 5 going into the second quarter. They were only down by 8 at halftime, so it was looking good, but the Clippers kept winning every single quarter, and so the lead just kept growing and growing. They were up by 15 going into the fourth, and it just stayed out of hand. Damian Lillard had a good game for the Blazers. He had 21 points, 8 assists, but he didn't shoot well. Only shot 40% from the field, 7 of 17. But the real egg was with CJ McCollum. He took 11 shots, he shot 27%, had 9 points, but honestly, he was not a factor in this game. Most of his points were scored once the game was already out of hand near the end, in the fourth quarter when it was already a 20-point blowout. He was absolutely useless in this game. I don't know what happened. I thought he was going to be Most Improved Player of the Year, but this game, he just didn't show up. Obviously, we've seen him do really well, especially last year. We saw it in the playoffs. But this year, he needs to step it up because he's the second best player on this team, and Damian Lillard cannot carry them on his own. Gerald Henderson was the other factor in this game. He played very well. He had 16 points, but overall their team just could not shoot well. They shot 40% compared to the Clippers, 54%, and it just wasn't enough to win. On the Clippers side, Chris Paul had a massive game. 28 points, 11 assists, 6 rebounds, and he was facilitating like the point guard he is. Everything was perfect. Pinpoint passes, right in the shooter's pockets, finding the open man, in the open court as well, in fast breaks. Just great overall play. DeAndre Jordan, 18 and 12. Blake Griffin. Now this is a player everyone wanted to see what he would do because he was obviously out most of the season due to, first of all, injuries to his hands, and also because of the incident where he punched a trainer in the face. And he came back in his first playoff game, 19 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, played really well and really aggressive. He wasn't actually taking his outside shot like we saw a lot of last year. Last year in the playoffs especially, he looked like he was really settling for outside jumpers. But now, when he got back into this game, he was fighting every single time down the court to get layups and dunks. He dunked all over Mason Plumlee twice in this game for and ones. Once in transition and once in the half-court set that was nasty. He was just playing out of his mind. And it was really good to watch because everyone was worried about whether or not he would actually be able to play at a high level in the playoffs and be able to do what he normally did and dominate, especially with his hand injuries and his lack of playing time. That rust really wasn't there, though. He was dominating from the start. Jamal Crawford also had a good game, and surprisingly enough, so did Austin Rivers, which is really good to see because their bench needed to play well if they hoped to win any games, and their bench has really started to click recently. Now, if only Paul Pierce and Jeff Green can have a little bit throwbacks, then their bench is going to be dominating in this playoffs. But I still believe that the Portland Trailblazers can win a couple of games in this series, especially in Portland. So, just because the first game was a blowout, I do feel as though it can be better the next game. Speaking of next games, we have 3 games tonight that are going to be really entertaining, hopefully. I doubt it, actually. Who am I kidding? The only really entertaining game tonight is probably going to be the Indiana Pacers versus the Toronto Raptors in Toronto. Indiana has a 1-0 series lead, despite the fact that they are the 7th seed, and Toronto is the 2nd seed, with home court advantage. But I'm hoping Toronto makes a bounce back. Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan shake off their normal playoff form of shooting awful, turning the ball over, and failing to defend properly, and actually score on George Hill and Paul George. We'll see though. It'll be an entertaining game because they're both seeming to be evenly matched, despite the fact that Toronto should have the advantage. The second game is Dallas versus OKC, which will most likely be a complete blowout and a disaster of a game to watch. And then finally is Golden State Warriors versus Houston. The only real draw to this game is to see how bad Houston can actually play this time, and whether or not Steph Curry is going to come out firing like he did when he got angry last game. Because Steph Curry was almost ruled out of this game. He might not actually play. And honestly, they don't need him to play because they can probably beat the Rockets without him. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not this injury actually lingers. So we'll see whether his impact is the same as it usually is, or if it's actually affected by the injury, or if he's not even playing. Who knows? But that'll be coming up tonight in the NBA, and I can't wait. Thanks for listening, guys. Leave a comment if you have any opinions on the games, or if you want to leave any feedback for the podcast. I appreciate it a lot. Have a great day.